Good morning.
Morning.
Frank Oliveria, Citizens for California High-Speed Rail Accountability. On October 14th at your last board meeting, we told you that we were aware that your design contractor had notified you that the route you have told the court you will build between San Francisco and Los Angeles will not work. Your contractor notified you via the September 2013 Program Management Team report. You've had this information for more than a year. Oddly, we do not remember this project-killing information ever being discussed at a board meeting or being released to the legislature or the public. The route that you have told the court you will build over the Tehachapi Mountains is too steep and unachievable. Change the route to a workable mountain crossing, you will blow your Prop 1A Phase 1 maximum trip time. What a conundrum. Stuck pretending you're building something that you know will violate the proposition to keep the federal era funding coming, or confess that you really have to redesign the project. What to do? We challenged you to explain this at the last meeting, to explain it here today, how you are going to travel over the Tehachapis and safely descend more than 4,000 feet while maintaining 220 miles per hour. Your program manager told the court you're planning to do it, but he did not disclose the PMT report. You're acquiring land and already have started construction. You're spending lots of federal era money, but sadly, we do not see this basic viability topic being discussed on your agenda today. This should be easy for you to explain. It is a reasonable request, and it is relevant to the $6 billion on the table today. Can you really connect the Central Valley to Southern California? We're talking about the key component of the initial operating segment, the iOS South. Is the Central Valley going to be that $6 billion stranded investment predicted by Senators DeSalle, Simitian, and Lowenthal in 2012? Are you uncomfortable discussing this matter with the public? How long are you going to cover this up? Would you care to explain this to us right now here today?
Does that conclude your remarks?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. Let me just say, Mr. Oliveira, that as you know, this is the time for public to speak to us, and so we generally don't get into a back and forth during the comment period. So, and you're submitting something for the record. Next speaker is Robert Allen, followed by Diana Lacombe. I'd just like to take a moment. One of our speakers this morning raised a question which was a reprise of something that had been raised at the last meeting that opened up the question of whether or not our program is technically feasible. And I think that these kinds of things often find their way into the press and public commentary. And so while it is our practice to allow the public, as we should, to speak to us without engaging in debate, I think this issue that's been raised is significant enough that I would turn to our CEO and ask him to comment on it. And as I do so, let me just say that for members of the public who've not yet had an opportunity to read the latest report from the High-Speed Rail Authority, pursuant to Senate Bill 1029, the appropriation bill that gave us the funds to go forward, and which requires us by November 1st, I think it is, and March 1st every year to provide a comprehensive report to the legislature about the status of the program, its funding, risk management, and so forth. Having just gone through that report, it's an excellent document, I felt, very comprehensive. I think it gives the public and the legislature who represent the public a real insight into the status of the program. And one thing Mr. Morales and I talked about the other day is stepping back. There's been a tremendous amount of progress in the last 6 months. when you look at the things that have been accomplished with that. So I commend that 1029 report to everybody to take a look at, to get a really good sense of where this program is and where it's going. But Mr. Morales, on this rather serious challenge that's been raised as to whether or not the fundamental engineering of our project as it relates to trans-Tehachapi routing is feasible or possible. Can you take a moment and talk about that?
Sure, happy to do so. And I'll say as a general point, Proposition 1A laid out some specific statutory criteria for design standards for the system, all of which are built into our process and are monitored and evaluated on an ongoing basis. Every alternative we look at, every alignment we look at, we measure against those criteria that are in Prop 1A. The questions that have been raised, certainly, we're accountable and need to be able to answer any and all questions. I think the way these have been raised, in some cases at least, either represent a fundamental misunderstanding of how the process works or misrepresentation of the process. But I'll explain or talk about it in part by working backwards. This board ultimately has the responsibility of selecting alignments and identifying and certifying for the environmental process specific alignments. Leading up to that is extensive, in most cases what has been years of review of various alternatives that get us to that point of being able to present to the board and to the public through the process the preferred alignment. Those review processes, which are done, in our case, that work is led primarily by what we refer to as the regional consultants who have the specific corridors, evaluate a myriad of alignments, of issues. The whole point of the process is to identify alternatives, identify issues, suggest where the best alternatives may be, identify where the biggest problems may be, and ultimately get us to that point of an alignment. That's not a stumble. That is the process working. I mean, that's the whole point of doing the process, is to identify where those challenges are, and how we work through them. And that's the report that has been referred to is being taken out of context in that it identified challenges and it identifies other possibilities, and we work through those ultimately to get to an alignment. In terms of getting through the Tehachapis, it is a challenge. I mean, there's no two ways around that. Getting through any mountain range is, but I would point out that the Southern Pacific managed to get through the Tehachapis in 1874 using pickaxes. I'm reasonably confident that using the world's best companies and technologies today, we will be able to do that and meet all of the requirements that we have. All of our entire process as we go through that is open and available to the public. That's what's been referred to as some of that information. But again, it's all part of that process of identifying alternatives, identifying issues, and ultimately arriving at the best and preferred alignment.
But as far as your engineering team sits there today, there's no secret that somehow we can't do this?
No.
Right.
I'd elaborate, but I think that's the best answer. No.
Okay. Right. All right. And yeah, I just think it's important sometimes. I mean, the public has the right to raise any question about this program, but I mean, I think it's important to point out that we do have top engineering talent. The notion going back to, Ms. Shank will remember the days that this project was put before the public in 2008 in Prop 1A, which contemplated going through Palmdale and up over the mountains. Obviously, people thought it could be done before they asked the public to support it. So,
and Mr. Chairman, if I just, I would also say we are fortunate, in part because of the issues we face in California, seismic issues and other things. We have some of the leading experts in the world on some of these issues, on seismic challenges in particular. But we also have the ability to tap into the best thinking around the world on these issues, and we have that through both contractual mechanisms, but also through memoranda of understanding that we have with other governments and others for information sharing. And, you know, other countries, Japan has built a system that goes through very similar sort of terrain, and we draw on that expertise. So, you know, we go forward with this in full confidence that we will meet all of the requirements, in full cognizance of what those requirements are, and with the best possible advice as we do it.
Okay. Any questions for our CEO on this? Okay. Turning then to the agenda.